Thank you everybody for coming along. So this afternoon we're going to be looking at our learn and share session on budgeting and forecasts. We're joined by Jenny, who is our head of finance and operations and also our deputy CEO for Northamptonshire Community Foundation. And she's going to be going through the basics of budgeting and forecasts for VCSE organisations. And I shall pass over to Jenny. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. So, hello everybody. So I'm going to go through some tips on budgeting and forecasting. I'm going to start this at quite a basic level with the presumption of no knowledge, because I think it's best to keep this fairly simple. And then obviously if anyone's got any questions, you can either ask me at the end of the session, or I'm always happy to take calls if you want to give me a ring and talk anything through. So starting, hopefully you can all see the presentation okay. What is a budget? So a budget is a plan to show how much money a person or organisation will earn, or how much they will need to or be able to spend. Why do we do budgets? Budgets help with things like setting financial goals, controlling our costs, improving our decision making and managing cash flow. Improving decision making, what I mean by that is if you're looking at giving staff a pay rise, taking on new members of staff, organising an event, purchasing new IT equipment, it's good to know if you've actually got the funds to spend that money before you commit to it. As a charity, it can be really, really hard to budget. Donations can be unpredictable. Grant income can be unpredictable. So how do we actually estimate our income? Where I always start is by looking at the regular donations. If you actually look at what you've earned in previous years, you might see that there's patterns emerging. You might have donors that pay at a certain time every year. You might have grants that you receive at a certain time every year. You might be able to estimate what any investment income that you're going to get month on month. Where I start is by looking at, for example, our Friends of the Foundation. We have regular donors that give to us every month. We have some grants that we receive at certain times of the year. If you can put all that into a spreadsheet, that will give you a basic idea of what you are likely to receive the following year. You can see I've kind of mocked up a very, very basic budget for you there. It is very, very simple because obviously if I'm putting it on a presentation, I can't do anything too complicated. But you'll see we've got regular donations there of £1,900, a grant of £5,000 and just some basic investment income. Once you've got all that plotted in, you can add in the one-off events and donations. So this might be that you're planning on holding a summer event, you're planning on having a Christmas dinner, or maybe a few of your donors have said, in May, we want to give a little bit more, we've got some more funds we'd like to give you, or in January, I've added a little bit more of a donation there because we always launch a campaign around that time of year. So some examples of what we do for that. We have our Warm This Winter campaign that we launched sort of September, October time. So I know that I can budget in September and October that we're going to have a campaign where we're likely to receive some donations for that campaign. So if you add that in, that will give you a basic budget of what your income is going to be. It's not an exact science, and I would always say, as a general rule, budget for income that is likely to come in, not that you hope will come in. You're better off being slightly pessimistic on your income side of it and not over budgeting for your income. So once you've kind of got an idea of what you think your income could be, you can then start looking at your expenses. Things like staff costs and rent are often the same month by month, so that's fairly straightforward to budget. Utilities is where you can then look at patterns. So our gas and electricity bill is always higher for the gas in the winter because we're using the heating in the office. So when I'm budgeting, I'll do an increase during the winter months, as you can see on this mock budget. Any other expenditure that you've committed to or that is essential for the running of your business, you should put into your expenses now. Once you've got a budget for your income and a budget for your committed and essential costs, you can then start thinking about what you'd like to spend money on in the following year. By leaving your nice to haves to last, you can see what you can actually afford to spend money on rather than putting in for a great new IT project that you want when you then won't be able to afford your rent or your staff costs. So if you leave your nice to haves until last, you can see what you can and can't afford. So for example, in here, I've put in some event costs, I've put in some marketing costs. Maybe you'd like to get some new leaflets or some nice tote bags to hand out at events. Leave that until the last minute though and put that in the budget at the end when you know that you can afford it. Once you've plotted all of that, you then have a very basic budget. You can see at the bottom, I've got reserves brought forward. Your reserves brought forward should be what you had left of income over expenditure at the end of the previous year, so whatever figure you had on your accounts. And then we have a running total throughout the year with our reserves carried forward. So we're going to, based on this budget, we're going to finish the year at a great position of over £11,000 worth of reserves, which for a budget of the size that I've mocked up is quite a nice budget. Once you've got your basic budget, have a review of it, check you're happy with it. I would always recommend speaking to your staff team and everyone else within the organisation and see what they would like you to budget for. I always have a chat with the donations team and see what events they're planning on holding, what campaigns they're planning on launching, what income they feel that is likely to come in. I'll have a chat with marketing and check what they're planning on spending money. It's always worth speaking to either your department heads or, depending on the size of your organisation, everyone within the organisation, because there's nothing worse than putting together a budget, getting it approved by all the trustees, being happy with it, and then the next day somebody turning around and saying, we've got this great idea for this new event that we're going to have, and we're going to start organising it and it's going to be next month. Like, we didn't budget for that because we didn't know about it. So always speak to the rest of your team and see what they want you to budget for. There is another type of budget that I think it's worth me mentioning today, and that's project budgets. Where a project budget is slightly different is I personally would work backwards. I would start off by working out what expenditure you need. So say, for example, you was planning on putting in a play park. Work out what the costs of putting in that play park would be. From there, you can work out how much expenditure you would need to cover that, how much income, sorry, you would need to cover that expenditure. Now, where this is really useful is if you're applying for funding. So, for example, if you're filling in a grant application, you need to know how much the costs are with that project so you can see how much income you actually need to cover them costs. So what is a forecast? A forecast is a prediction or estimate of what is likely to happen in the future. We forecast to be able to plan for the future, to support decision making, to measure performance, and to adjust our plans before any problems occur. I always start, if I'm doing a forecast, with my budget. I'll make a copy of that budget, and then each month I will adjust the budgeted figures for my actual figures, and then adjust for any other changes that I know about. So I've mocked up a very basic forecast, and as you can see on the left of the red line, I've put in the actual figures for April to June. On the right of the line, we've got the forecasted figures. For April, May and June, with our grants figure there, we was expecting £5,000 to come in. Unfortunately, we only received £3,000. Donations were slightly different to what was budgeted, so we've replaced them budgeted figures with our actuals. Then if we go down to the expenses, you can see on the utilities, unfortunately in May, we received a big utilities bill where we'd been undercharged for a few months. Now, because I know that the utility estimate that I put into the budget was incorrect, I have therefore changed the future forecasted figures to what I think they now will be instead. That's all of these orange highlighted ones. Now, in the example that I've got on the screen here, you can see that our expenses have gone up and our income has come down. This is the point that you can then have a look and see if you can still afford to do everything that you was planning on doing. Can we still afford to buy the pretty tote bags? Can we still afford the new leaflets? Can we still afford to do the events that we were planning on doing? Now, on this one, we can, in this mock-up, but it might be that at this point you're like, my income's gone down so far this year, my expenditure has gone up so far this year, we're going to have to cut back, we're going to have to not spend as much money on marketing materials, or we might have to cancel that future event because we just can't afford it anymore. By doing a forecast and adjusting them as the months go by, it helps you with that planning, and it helps you see if a future problem is going to occur before that problem actually does occur. So what's the difference on budgeting and forecasting? Budgeting is fixed. You plan your budget at the beginning of the year and that is a fixed document. Whereas for a forecast, you update it as expectations, and as things change, you're always looking at your forecasts, updating them as you know circumstances are changing.